I've had actually one biblical scholar on here, I think, that is not a Christian or a practicing Christian. I think
two
he
now.
was. Oh, two. Wow. Awesome. You're number two.
So I'm number two. So the majority, I would say, are Christians or Jewish. And I mean, this stands to reason, because the people who would have the most interest in these texts, in this literature,
Right. Would subscribe to the belief.
and that's where I started too.
Really?
Right. Yeah. I was originally planning to be a pastor at a church. Didn't particularly like it very much, had an affinity for the languages and the history. And over time, just kind of switched tracks. And then over more time, I just stopped believing the things that I believed when I was younger.
What do you think made you stop believing in it?
That's a complicated question. And it's a variety of things. One of the things certainly is the fact, like when you go into the scholarship of the Bible, you quickly discover that it's a very different type of book than you thought it was. And that all the literature in there is quite different than you thought it was.
How so?
Well, you grow up thinking, or at least I grew up thinking, that Moses was a guy who actually led a group of people out of Egypt into Israel, and then he crossed the Red Sea, and all this stuff actually happened. You learn things like this, right? Or that Daniel was actually a guy who was living in Babylon, and King Nebuchadnezzar actually put him in, a den full of lions. These are the sorts of things that you can, lots of people are taught as having actually happened. You discover that's all, not what happened. So there probably was no Moses. The Israelites probably did not come out of Egypt. In fact, what we know now is that the Israelites, the people from whom the Old Testament, the text of the Hebrew Bible came, were Canaanites. There were people who were always there. And it's, the religions as it's presented in the Bible is you get this impression that this was the way people worshiped God all the time. But then when you encounter the archaeological record and when you compare these texts to other ancient Near Eastern texts, you say, well, no. The people who wrote these biblical texts probably came out of a world that looked very much like all of their neighbors. So one of the things you think, lots of people think when they encounter the Old Testament, is that everyone was a monotheist. They all believe there's just one God, and all the other gods are fake.
Monists.
So yeah, it's and that's just not true. The original writers of the Bible were polytheists. They believed in many gods. But the way the texts have been written, the way they present the situation, they're deeply they're deeply biased. They propagandize a lot of this material. A lot of the texts were written, by people who were had their own political, religious agendas that they're trying to forward. And you start to see all this sort of stuff. And it starts to, I guess, raise questions. It started to raise questions for me about how much can I trust these texts, this Bible? What do I, in terms of it being something divine? No, it's not that. It's a very human book. So I think that's kind of where it started for me. It also makes, in my mind now, it makes the text actually quite a bit more interesting and exciting, because you're dealing with real people, right, in real situations. But I don't know. It was that was a contributing factor, but there were, there's other things too.
Yeah, one of the things that seems so crazy to me, what our buddy Neil over there explained to me, was that I think it's like 900 or 1,000 years after Moses' death until we get actual writing about him,
Yeah.
which was what, the Septuagint?
Well, there's Greek writings that mention his name. And we were actually just talking about this yesterday. I personally think that you can see some reflections of this Moses figure a little earlier than that, not 1,000 years before that, but I think you can see some mention of him as early as maybe the 8th or the 7th century BC, which is still 500 years after he supposedly
What is
lived.
that? What are you referring to?
So there's a text. It's in the Bible. There's a text in the book of Hosea. This is a prophet who wrote probably in the 8th century BCE, and I can probably actually just bring it up here.
Yeah, give Kipp the wheel. There you go.
Okay, so we'll go to Amos 12. So this is a prophecy that scholars tend to date to the 8th century. And here he's I'll just get to
And this is
stuff where
this is from what text specifically?
so this is the book of Amos, which is in the Bible.
Which was written when?
Sorry, not Amos, Hosea. I got that wrong.
Hosea. and when was this text written?
Most scholars think 8th century, and the reason we think that is because all of what Hosea is talking about is the end of the kingdom of Israel in the north in 722 BCE. But he's writing before that has happened. Like he's writing to the people who are there and telling them, you're in great danger because the Assyrians are coming to kill you. You need to make all these dramatic changes because God is angry at you.
Right.
And if you don't, then the Assyrians are going to come and destroy you. And that's something that eventually happened, right? But this is all written prior, beforehand. So in this text, though, he does talk a little bit about...
Can you zoom in a little bit?
I probably can. Let me get to the right... Oh, no, that's why I'm in Amos, dude. This is my own translation.
Okay.
Of the text. Let's go there. Nice and big. All right. So here.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah. So now where it says Ephraim here. So Ephraim has said, this is speaking to the people who live in the city of Samaria.
Okay.
Sometime before 722 BCE. So this is before the Assyrians are coming to kill them all, right?
Right.
So, and Hosea, the prophet, is speaking to them and telling them, you have fucked up. And because of that, the Assyrians are coming to kill you. You need to fix this. You need to change your ways. Otherwise, you're all going to be dead. And here, this is what he says. He says, so Ephraim has said, yes, I am rich. I have sought power for myself. All of my property they cannot hold against me for wrongdoing, which is sin. Now, Hosea is speaking as if he's God. I, Yahweh, am your God. Ever since the land of Egypt, I will settle you once again in tents, as in the days of old, when I spoke to prophets, when I increased visions, parables by the hands of prophets. But in Gilead is iniquity, and they are utterly worthless. So you have here, you have mention of this exit from Egypt. These people came out of Egypt ever since the land of Egypt. They were settling, they were living in tents ever since the days of old when I spoke to prophets, when I increased visions. Let me just look here at, I have another, there's another part of this.
So
Here we go.
So this is basically what academia or the consensus is, that he's talking about something that's happening in like 3000 BC.
No, 8th century BCE.
8th century. Okay.
So
800. Got it.
So yeah, like sometime before 722 BC.
So much closer to the death of Moses.
Closer, but and again, importantly, scholars by and large don't think that there was a Moses. They think that this guy was certainly
Really?
Yeah. I
Even
would say,
religious scholars?
Well, A number of religious scholars,
Huh.
yes.
People who
but
subscribe to it,
Not
they're-
all of them.
Okay.
But and religious people will have complicated ways of I guess compartmentalizing and even aligning various things that they believe.
Right.
One of the really interesting things, here, this, I can, just scrolling down towards the end, he goes on to say, I think this part is quite interesting. By a prophet, Yahweh brought Israel up from Egypt. By a prophet, he was kept. So scholars look at that and think, well, that's probably an early reference to this Moses figure. But I think it's really interesting because he's not named. It doesn't call him Moses.
Right.
So when I look at this, I think, this Moses tradition, wherever it came from, he probably didn't have the name Moses to start. And it probably looked quite a bit different than the story that ended up surviving and being told in, the book of Exodus. So it's I would say that it's something that you can trace maybe as far, I would say the earliest you can trace it as far back is probably like the 8th century.
Okay, but biologically, how early can we trace it?
Biologically,
the actual text,
the actual manuscripts, the actual artifacts themselves.
Yeah.
No, not until the 3rd century BCE. So, and
it's
this
in what language?
That would be in Greek, I believe,
Greek.
and we have Hebrew manuscripts from the same period of time as well, where you will find the name Moses. Yeah,
Hebrew manuscripts, and that's Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yep.
Okay.
Within the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Wow.
So, it's frustrating on the one hand because you can't get the actual artifacts themselves, right? Like you can't get the physical evidence for the stuff that's being reported. But by the same token, a lot of this stuff didn't just appear out of thin air. These were traditions that people kept and transmitted over longer periods of time, and I think changed and were reshaped.
So the idea is this was probably, you believe, found whenever it was found, it was dated back to 300 BC probably.
Yeah.
And it was a rewriting or a retelling of a story that happened around 800.
Yeah, probably.